we're here to talk about ways in which we can be more innovative and be more reform-minded when it comes to K-12 public education in our state. The idea or the claim that we must do this is not a new one. It predates the pandemic, and it's something that I've been interested in for certainly my 25 years or more in public education. And so before I get to my slides, I just want to take a second and talk about what we mean when we talk about the K-12 system of education. What do we mean when we talk about that system? So what we mean is that students, by law, starting in the first grade, must spend a certain amount of time prescribed by law in either a homeschool education setting, in a private school, or in a public school. If we're talking about public K-12 education, that time in classroom, or as teachers say, butts in seats, takes place in a building that houses students according to their age. So typically we have 5 and 6 year olds in a building through 10 and 11 year olds. Then we put 11 and 12 year olds along with 13 and 14 year olds. Then we have our 14 through 18 year olds in yet another building. The arrival and departure times of those students are largely determined by a school's sports schedule. If the school is lucky enough, perhaps their band schedule as well. Children are divided into grades based on their age, with the time fixed and the learning as the variable. We ask our teachers to differentiate instruction, meaning tailor the instruction for all students in a classroom based on their individual ability. So if I'm a teacher with 27 children in a classroom, I am oftentimes expected to show my administrators how am I meeting the needs for all 27 distinct learners in my classroom. By the time a child is in high school, he or she is expected to take a course load that was largely determined by educators at Harvard University over 120 years ago, where we take biology freshman year, another science sophomore year, chemistry junior year, physics senior year. That 4-year track determines whether or not a person is going to attend a 4-year university. And if a student is lucky enough to have someone in their life who knows how to help them play the GPA game, they will then figure out how to get the highest GPA they can so they can go to a top-notch school. If you attend a high school that values and offers a non-college path, which many of our high schools do, then you will have an alternative to a 4-year residential college experience. And this is exactly what our testing and accountability model reflects. And that's something of what I'm going to talk about today. So there's a lot of things good going on in public education in our state and country, but there's a lot of things that I feel are not so great. And so I'm here uttering the words before you that President Reagan called the 9 scariest in the English language. I'm from the government and I'm here to help. So let's get to it. So as you all have heard by now, not soon after I took office in January, I launched what I call Operation Polaris, which was inspired by my North Star. My North Star and that of my teams is that every child in North Carolina must have a highly effective and excellent teacher in every classroom. That is my North Star because we who work in government at the intersection of government and education need something to keep us centered on the students. It's very easy for the adult conversation to take over, but we need to stay student-centered as much as we can. So you heard me talk last week about the Office of Learning, Recovery, and Acceleration, which sits at the center of this plan. The purple circle around that represents the work we are doing pre-pandemic in our lowest 5% of performing schools by law. you'll see that there are 4 satellites surrounding the centerpiece: literacy, human capital, accountability and testing, and student support services. And the words equity run throughout these 4 satellites. Let me be very clear. Equity does not mean ensuring equal outcomes. Equity means providing all students what they need when they need it. That is the definition of educational equity. So one of the ways that we can start to transform our public system of K-12 education is by looking at the way we measure that system, because what gets measured gets done, as we all know. So right now we have a very straightforward way of defining school quality at the state level, and that is we take a weighting system of 80% achievement, which is how students did on high stakes end of grade testing, and then we weigh that against 20% growth. How far did a teacher take a group of students from here to there during a school year or a semester? And then our federal accountability model is those 2 things, but we also add in our ACT scores. Right now in North Carolina, all children are mandated to take the ACT in high school. And right now, only 18% of North Carolina juniors, when they take the ACT, meet all 4 ACT college readiness benchmarks. Not all states require students to take the ACT, therefore our scores compared to another states would not necessarily be a valid comparison. The reason I believe that we need to transform this K-12 accountability model is because it's not an accurate representation of how we should be defining school quality. We need to redefine school accountability and rethink what student testing looks like. Right now, as I shared last week in the GovOps presentation to the Senate and to members of the House, we have an 87% high school graduation rate, yet only 31% of our students attain any kind of credential of value, of marketplace value. In other words, a credential they can get a job with by the time they are 24. Economic mobility rests on education. Education is still the surest pathway to the middle class in this country. So what are factors that should be included in a new kind of state accountability model? Well, we should certainly be looking at achievement and growth, but we should also focus on other measures as well, including the extent to which a high school offers or allows for students to take advantage of college and career promise, funded by the legislature, that allows for students to take community college classes while still in high school at the state's expense. What kinds of tutoring programs might an elementary school offer its students? What kinds of after-school programs do they offer? Robotics, which the legislature is funding this time. Parent satisfaction surveys. To what extent does a parent feel that they are being engaged in their child's school? How much access do parents have to school leadership and teachers? There are many different. Chronic absenteeism is a very good example of something that we should include in a school accountability model. Right now, teachers are hamstrung by an accountability model that overly relies on a high stakes, one and done end of grade test that does not, the results of which do not come to a teacher in time for the teacher to do anything about the results, because it's summer when the teacher gets the results. We want to make sure that all students know what career path they're on, and that all students know how they are being prepared for their future, and that should certainly be a part of a school accountability model. So one of the things that my team and I have been working on since last February, is something called a portrait of a graduate. Now, we have a handful of districts that have this already, but we believe that if we have a statewide portrait of a graduate that capitalizes on not just the academic piece that we expect students to graduate with, but also the durable skills that employers complain they cannot find, and that also ensure that a student is more likely to be successful in a post-secondary community college program or a four-year college program. Things like persistence, help-seeking behaviors, critical thinking skills, the ability to be collaborative, the ability to be responsible and develop healthy relationships. Those are what are known as durable skills. And while I would say that our career technical educators, I was with them this morning at their conference, by the way, while our career and technical educators teach those kinds of things in classes like welding, automotive, ag, pre-nursing, all of those kinds of fields that are very much focused on a competency-based approach to learning a skill or a trade, as well as working collaboratively, working to solve problems. We need more of that in our academic settings. We need to provide rigor in a way that teachers don't often feel that they have the freedom to do because they are teaching to the test. So we are hoping in the fall of 2022 to present to the General Assembly, our K-12 educational partners, as well as the State Board of Education, a statewide portrait of a graduate that will have been compiled by meeting with all 8 education regions in the state, partnering with not just educators, but business owners, faith-based communities, and the like. Here's an example of Cumberland's portrait of a graduate that is countywide, and you can see some of their metrics are creative innovator, critical problem solver, skilled communicator. These are the things that we should actually be measuring when we say that a student has graduated from high school. If we continue to say we're so proud of our 87% high school graduation rate, and yet only 31% of students are attaining a credential of marketplace value, then that diploma does not have the integrity that we want it to have. This is not a new idea. South Carolina has a portrait of a graduate, as does Virginia, North Dakota, Kentucky, and Georgia. And then Ohio, Texas, New Hampshire, and Washington have competency-based assessment models that fit into statewide portraits. So before I move on to the next topic, are there any questions?
Representative Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Superintendent, so glad to have you with us today. That last statement that you made, every now and then I get emails from people that their kids graduate from high school. They think they're doing real well. They go out to the community college, they take some sort of entrance test, and they find out that they've got to take extra courses because they didn't score high enough after graduating from high school. Is that what you're referring to as a credentials?
Thank you for the question, Representative Shepherd. So what those parents are talking about is that when their child took an entrance test for their community college, they were told that their either or both their reading and math scores were not at the correct level to pursue credit-bearing coursework. And so therefore, their child must take remedial education courses. So you raise a very good question, because the truth is that remedial education courses do not lead to credits. And so what happens, and the community colleges can give you the best data on this, but an overwhelmingly large number, first of all, it's in the 60% of kids going to community college end up having to take remedial work. And maybe 5 years ago or so, the community colleges set about changing the way they remediate students. But the truth is that the majority of students who must pursue remedial math and reading don't ever make it through the programs. They get very discouraged, and they don't ever make it to credit-bearing coursework. Just for a minute about why that is. It's sort of a continuation of what I've been sharing with you so far in this presentation. We have a reputation for being a place as a state that people want to live. And I don't have to tell anyone in this room why people move here in droves. And in fact, we've in the past been able to meet our workforce demand in the state because we are a net importer of talent. But pre-pandemic, the My Future NC Commission shared with all of us that we were on track by 2024 not to meet our workforce development goals because the number, while we still do have people moving here, our economy has grown so much that it's not enough anymore. And we need to start educating the students who live here. Right now, only half of our state have training and credentials of post-secondary value. And that is what led to the My Future NC attainment goal. So we absolutely must better align what our schools are offering students to make sure that it meets workforce demand. And that means that while we've got some districts who are offering IT credentials, with which a student could get a job the day after they graduate from high school, we've got other districts who are still offering first aid, which quite frankly does not constitute a career path. So that's an equity issue. We need to help our districts who cannot, who are not going to have teachers to teach IT living in their community, or welding, for example. How can we teach welding when welders can make more money being a welder than teaching welding? So we're going to have to get creative in the way that we solve for this human capital challenge. 22,224 new jobs were announced in 2021 in North Carolina. The $10 billion in business investment was an all-time high. We have a very friendly tax structure, great quality of life, and it still is an affordable place to live compared to other cities with the same economic growth that this state has. Our community colleges and, again, affordable universities as compared to other states and their state school tuition. But we have labor market forces that are working against us right now that really call for K-12 education to reframe a little bit, take a step back and say, what can we do to make sure that we are preparing students to be successful when they graduate from high school? There were a lot of things happening in this realm pre-pandemic, and the big quit or the great resignation, whatever you want to call it, during the pandemic has exacerbated this. The employee is in the driver's seat right now. So trends that we're seeing, again, not so much different because of the pandemic. You know, before the pandemic, I've been hearing for years that employers are frustrated because employees can't count change. They don't show up for work on time. They can't pass a drug test. All kinds of challenges. But we are not going to go back to normal in education, and nor should we. And so we need to, again, think about how can we improve this system that we have in order to get different results, because the system is designed to give us the results that we're getting. So what is the role of credentials in K-12 and workforce? Well, credentials are things that can be stacked. They can be a one-off, or they can be stacked into some other kind of education or degree. For example, many schools offer teacher cadet programs, many high schools. Those teacher cadet credits can then be put towards a 2-year teacher prep degree to community college, which then can be put towards a teacher education degree. This is what UNC Pembroke is doing in Robeson County Schools. It's very exciting. Industry recognized non-degree credentials will help us build a talent pipeline. And it should be starting in high school at no cost to our high school students, and is in many places. Halifax County has got an incredible solar panel program, solar panel installation program, where students earn an hourly wage while they're participating in the program, and then as soon as they're finished, they've got a job. Same thing, they're doing a IT help desk credential. That's an actual credential that can get you a better than minimum wage job. So we know that the fastest growing jobs require a post-secondary degree or non-degree credential. We know that by 2030, 70% of jobs are going to require some knowledge of computer science. So thank you to the legislature for funding a new computer science division at the Department of Public Instruction so that we can take the computer science standards that have been developed and we can start providing professional development to our teachers so that we can get more children knowledgeable and involved in computer science jobs. So you can see the My Future NC statistic there. 2 out of 3 jobs in our state require education after high school, yet less than half of North Carolinians have the level of education required. This is what economists call a mismatch. We've got all these jobs over here that are open and all these people over here without a job, but these people don't have the credentials to fill these jobs. As I said, education is still the surest way to the middle class, to economic freedom and prosperity. Durable skills and additional education attainment are vital to growing our economy as we have been. But we need to make sure that our students are introduced to K-12, to the notion of a K-12 journey as a career path early on. Students need to hear about something other than becoming a doctor or a lawyer or a nurse. And the college for all cry from the 90s and 2000s needs to become careers for all, because not all students need to go to college. And just because they don't go to college right after high school doesn't mean they won't go someday. But not all students want or need to go to college. And the more we tell them that they should, the more bifurcation we are putting into place between career technical education and students who are on track to go to a 4-year university. So I'm going to skip ahead because we've talked about this already. We're in the process right now. My team is crosswalking what the goals that we have for us to be able to meet economic development needs as per My Future NC, we need to crosswalk that with what each of our districts has on offer. Because again, we've got some districts that they've been doing this right for 10, 20 years. And then we've got other districts that have some catching up to do. So I do have this available. I'm happy to email to you what the workforce goals actually are. And then on January 26th, Mr. Gary Salamito and I participated in a webinar hosted by the Chamber, moderated by Mevin Rash of EdNC, where we answered questions about what is the business case for companies investing their time and resources by offering internships. We do have communities that have actually gone to community colleges and high schools and said, can you help me create a pathway so I can grow my business in Cabarrus County?
Superintendent, thank you. I like your idea about the, I think we need doctors and nurses, but maybe a quota on lawyers would be sufficient.
I would agree, being married to one.
With that, we'll go to any questions from members of the, Representative Will, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Superintendent Truitt, you mentioned earlier the GPA game. that we're playing as a parent of a freshman in high school now, and someone that's been actively involved in our community and education for a while. You know, I've seen this firsthand, and when I got a pamphlet, I don't even call it a pamphlet, more of a binder of materials for him to choose from what he was going to need for his high school education. High school has become kind of a micro version of the university system, at least in our district. And it's trying to be everything to everyone, rather than focusing on exactly your point, trying to create a student who has desirable skills to be able to go out and get a career with or without a 4-year degree. And so I think as we look at what, and apologies to our friends in the UNC system, what a lot of folks are looking at now is an experience rather than an education that's going to get them a higher career, unless you're an engineer or a doctor or a scientist, something that needs that additional, those hours. I mean, that maturing phase within our educational system, the university system, really can be done learning on the job through apprenticeships, through internships, through other things that's really going to help set these students up for a better life beyond their educational time. And I think we've got to figure out how, and I know it's a difficult conversation because we look at what happens around the rest of the country and comparing our students to other states, and if students want to go to school out of state, looking at their GPAs on that, but we have got to stop this GPA game, manipulating courses and classwork for students to be able to take a class that they may have no interest in because it's going to be an easy A, or it's going to help them bump up. They can get an honors course in this or that, or they can take something that has no interest to them whatsoever, rather than helping them prepare for life beyond high school. What are your thoughts, or what are you guys doing in terms of looking at that and what we can do here in North Carolina to stop playing that game?
That's $1 million question. I'm facing this, I've faced it with my college-age daughter already. I'm facing it right now with my junior. And we'll face it with my 7th grader. So I was told about 2 years ago that one of our flagship universities had said publicly that they wanted more well-rounded students. That message has not gotten to our families, to our counselors, and to our students. And I don't even know if that's really true, because I believe that they're still weeding out with SAT, ACT scores pre-pandemic, as well as looking at GPAs. I don't know what the answer is. I know that one of the things that we're looking at in my department to try to mitigate this is to create a toolkit for counselors and a toolkit for parents, so that they can understand what the alternative pathways are and the dollar figures attached to those pathways, both in cost to get there and future earnings. I think that some parents have a fear that because they've been sold a bill of goods, that if their child doesn't go to college, they won't make it to the middle class. And so through no fault of their own, they're kind of encouraging their children down this perhaps the American dream as they see it, I don't know. But we have to combat this with more information. Even high schools that have gotten rid of class ranking, those students are still playing the GPA game. So I'm not sure what the answer is, but I'd sure be happy to brainstorm with you on that. We also have an assistant principal leadership accelerator program, because so frequently our administrators do not get professional development, and everyone could be doing better at what they do. So this is something that we're paying for with funding courtesy of the Belt Foundation. And we are, the purpose of the program is to work with assistant principals in high need schools so that we can fill our pipeline of principals. So Letters Cohort update, you can see here that in the early childhood community, we've trained a little over 1,600 preschool teachers in the early childhood version of Letters training. For K-5 teachers, we've trained a little over 23,000. And then for our administrators, because the legislation calls for at least one administrator from all elementary schools to participate also, we are over 1,000 for that. I will also add, because someone mentioned the 4-year system, I believe it was you, Representative Hurley, the UNC system is, they have identified literacy fellows who are taking this training and then taking it back to their colleagues so that our faculty will, if they're not already a science of reading person, that they will understand what this training is all about and what the research says about how our brains learn to read. You can just, if you're curious to see who has completed where, you know, which counties have completed which courses, you can see right here that that information. And I'm really excited to tell you that Polk County will be the first to complete the full letters training in March. They got right out in front of this, and we're just so proud of them and all of our early adopters who decided to see the light instead of feel the heat. So this is, this is just more, this is actually the implementation guide as per the legislation. Report will come to JLOC at some point, but if you would care to see these slides close up, just let me know and we'll get those to Representative Truitt. And I believe that's the end. So.